World War II and the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, 1942 to 1945. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time to watch this session, which is part of the overall unfolding saga of the Philippines. I'm going to be concentrating on the second phase of the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, which is the period of 1942 to 1945. Those 3 years were particularly traumatic as well as transformative for the country. It was one of the most significant periods of Philippine history. This is where I begin, and this is where I really end on this subject. To put things in perspective, it is necessary to look back at Japan's role in Asia before the invasion. Prior to the occupation, Japan had occupied Korea mainly due to the same imperialist goals undertaken in the part of the European countries. That occupation began in 1910. Japan had moved in the 1930s within China, occupying parts of China and taking over Manchuria in the process. When they occupied Nanking, a particularly brutal period began, called the Rape of Nanking. Thousands of civilians were killed, and worse at the time were atrocities on the part of both of the Japanese military as well as private citizens of Japan against the Chinese civilian population. 2 days before Christmas of 1941, for the first time in 400 years, Japanese forces had finally landed again on Philippines shore near Legazpi, after defeating American forces and Filipino forces on the Bataan Peninsula and finally on the island of Corregidor. General Douglas MacArthur ordered the American and Filipino forces to surrender. At this point in time, in January 1942, the American-Philippine troops from Bataan surrendered as a sign that they could move troops out to their other battles. After surrendering, the captured forces faced the Bataan Death March. Tens of thousands of Filipinos and American prisoners of war were forced to march for up to 100 miles without food, water, or rest. By the end, only 54,000 troops remained. Between 5,000 and 18,000 of these soldiers died from starvation, dehydration, exposure, abuse, and murder at the hands of the Japanese army. Once Japan controlled the archipelago, the situation did not improve. The Japanese military regime demanded complete obedience, conducted widespread propaganda, and established severe rules. Civilian Filipinos suffered from a shortage of food as well as the added impact of repeated Japanese violence. The Japanese even used Filipino women as comfort women, kidnapped, raped, and forced into sex slavery by the Japanese military. Many of these women suffered decades of demons as a result of their enslavement. Beyond any doubt, this was the blackest chapter of the Second World War for the Philippines. Unfortunately, things only worsened for the island nation. The occupation was not yet over. All of that changed in 1944, for in that year signs of freedom began to emerge. In October of 1944, General Douglas MacArthur fulfilled his promise to the people of the Philippines by returning to the archipelago and announced, "I have returned," with help from some guerrilla forces of the Philippines. The American-led Allied troops retook control over Leyte and eventually the northern coast of Luzon. Military forces also recaptured Manila, the capital of the Philippines, by March 1945, though the Japanese forces held out for a month, murdering more than 100,000 Filipino civilians in the infamous Manila Massacre. In August of 1945, the Philippines finally won its independence from Japan. A few days later, Japan surrendered to the United States after America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you for watching my presentation. That's all.